I enlisted the help of ChatGPT to help me compare every single draft pick with their consensus board ranking. In this video, we'll see which players fell, and in the next one, we'll see which teams reached. But, before we get into it, there's 3 things we need to establish. First, I'm going to be filtering these guys based on what I'm deeming to be the surprising reaches or falls. I'm mostly limiting the video to guys that the draft community knew were falling during the draft itself. I'll then quantify the fall by comparing their actual draft position with their position on Arif Hassan's consensus big board, which you can find on ProFootballNetwork.com and in the description. Second, these are not my opinions. I'm going to try to keep this list as objective as possible and present the list in that same objective manner. I want this to act as a snapshot in time of how consensus analysts viewed the players versus how the NFL viewed the players. And then in a few years, we can come back and see who is right. And obviously, there's nothing more important than being right. Lastly, it's important to remember that defining a fall depends on the context. For example, a fall from the first round to the second round is considered massive. Yeah, we're talking about you, Bill. Whereas a fall from the 6th to the 7th is not. Thus, the numbers in the later rounds will be much larger, while the earlier rounds will be smaller. Lastly, there may be some guys on here who didn't fall as many spots as you think, but the context in which they fell has been newsworthy. Yeah, we're talking about you again. Please stop with those pouty eyes, you're making me feel bad. Alright, here's our nice little chart. We'll start from day 3, and we'll work our way to round 1. Too much talking, not enough football. Let's get into it. Corey Trice, real name, no gimmicks. Yeah, copyright me, bitch. I don't get ad revenue anyway. With the 241st pick in the NFL draft, the Pittsburgh Steelers selected Corey Trice, a cornerback out of Purdue, finally ending his fall at a whopping 129 spots. This is the largest fall of any player in the draft when undrafted players are not considered. Trice became a really hot name in the draft community within the last month or so and moved up on a lot of DraftNix boards. Brett Coleman even had him going round 1 in a mock draft and had him as cornerback 5. Trice was also ranked as the 22nd non-quarterback overall by the Shrine Bowl scouts. It's speculated he fell due to medical concerns, but it's not confirmed at this time. I'm really excited to look at what happens in the future with Trice, and hopefully he's able to stay healthy. Not far behind Trice is Ohio State center Luke Whippler, who fell 120 spots to the Browns at pick 190. Whippler doesn't have the most upside ever, but he has a potential to become at least an average starter in the NFL, and his athleticism makes him a fantastic fit for the Browns. Mock drafts generally had him going in the 3rd or 4th round type range, and some analysts even had him as the number 1 center over John Michael Schmitz earlier in the draft cycle. After a small drop-off, A.T. Perry was taken by the Saints at pick 195, ending his fall at 105 spots. Perry actually addressed his fall in a recent conference, where he stated, quote, "They said it was some character stuff, which kind of confused me, but there's nothing I can do about that. The past is the past. Let's get going." End quote. He didn't say the quote parts, that was just me. Moro Ajomo is a crazy story. He's played 5 years in college football, but he's only 21 years old. A lot of mock drafts had him going anywhere from the 3rd to the 5th, but it was pretty rare to see him falling to the 7th. It's not hard to see why. He's a solid run defender with lots of experience, and he has great 88th percentile length. Jalen Duncan only slightly trails Ajomo after he fell 101 spots on draft day to pick 186, where he was taken by the Tennessee Titans. Duncan was generally considered a 4th or 5th rounder and was mocked to go in about the spot that Blake Freeland went, which was the 4th round. They're both similar prospects in that they're both technically unrefined but tested very well athletically. After transferring from TCU, Zach Evans was poised to have a breakout year for Ole Miss in 2022, leading many analysts to have him high up on their draft board. He played well this season, but didn't explode onto the scene as many hoped. The main criticism for Evans is that he seems to rely too heavily on his athleticism and lacks vision. We know the NFL isn't adverse to reaching on athletes, but apparently they were for Evans, who fell 98 spots from his consensus ranking to the Rams at pick 215. Antonio Johnson was the 2nd-ranked safety on Dane Brugler's big board and his number 70 player overall. This falls about in line where consensus saw him, as he was ranked the 64th best player. Unfortunately for Johnson, he'd go almost 100 spots later at pick 160 to the Jacksonville Jaguars, where he was the 11th safety taken. Next up is one of my favorite picks in the NFL draft, DeWayne McBride, who fell to the Vikings in the 7th round at pick 222, ending his slide at 83 spots. McBride is an extremely fun runner to watch, and it will be fantastic in a rotation. He could even step up into the starting role if Dalvin Cook is traded. My best guess for why he fell is that he has a huge fumbling problem and he lacks receiving ability. Trey Tomlinson, the cornerback from TCU, fell 80 spots to the Rams at pick 182. It's surprising that a cornerback who only allowed a 34.6 completion percentage and had 41 pass breakups in his collegiate career was picked this late, especially with a good level of competition. He's also related to LaDainian Tomlinson. but Hodges Tomlinson is 5'8", which is first percentile height for the cornerback position. Still, most did not expect he would fall quite this far. Kayshon Boutte fell to the Patriots in the 6th round, which was a surprise to most. He had great tape in 2021, but his 2022 season was riddled with injuries and personality concerns, culminating with getting called out publicly by his head coach. It was known he'd fall because of the character issues, but no one expected it to be this far. DeJuan Jones was one of the most surprising falls in my opinion, and is actually the player who inspired this video. Jones was consistently ranked in the late 1st or early 2nd rounds. I never saw a single mock draft where he fell outside of that area. Everything seemed to be going particularly well for him after he dominated his first day of the Senior Bowl, but apparently it wasn't. Supposedly, the reason for his fall was due to a poor pre-draft process, in which Jones sat out after his first day in the Senior Bowl, refused on his own volition to weigh in at his pro day, and supposedly told teams during his interviews that it was his dream to play in the NBA. But on tape, he seems to move really well for his size and has a massive wingspan. He's also 6'8" and 1/4, which is 97th percentile. I was shocked during draft day when he fell this far. On day 3, Kelee Ringo joined many of his Georgia teammates when he was picked by the Eagles in the 4th round, but no one really expected him to make it this far. He was consistently on the top of the best available lists after day 3, and many were shocked. There are concerns about his ability to change direction and anticipate route breaks, but a 4.36 second 40-yard dash at almost 6'2" is way too freaky for Howie Roseman to pass up. As a member of the Eagles, maybe Ringo will become a star. Get it? Ringo, star, Beatles? No? Okay. Adetomiwa Adebaware was seen as a potential late 1st round, early 2nd round pick due to his extremely high upside, stemming from an insane combine performance wherein he ran a 4.49 second 40-yard dash, which came in at 97th percentile for the position. It was a shock during the draft when he was the 12th interior defensive lineman taken, going behind players such as Broderick Martin and Siaki Ika. He no doubt has some development to do as he struggles to finish plays, and he also has tweener size, making it hard to project whether he'll play on the inside or as an edge. But it was surprising that he fell all the way to the 4th round, where he was eventually picked by the Colts. That's the end of day 3, but before we move to day 2, here are some honorable mentions from day 3, as well as some undrafted free agents that were surprising falls. This list includes one of my favorite players in the draft, Ivan Pace, who I think is going to be an awesome linebacker for the Vikings, and Andre Carter, who was put in some 1st round mock drafts earlier in the season, but fell due to concerns with his Army training, making it difficult for him to put on weight and test really well at the combine. Ultimately though, I'm pretty surprised that he wasn't picked at all, as he has a lot of upside and changes direction really well for his size. So now we get into day 2, where there are quite a few notable names, first of which is Darnell Washington, who was the 8th tight end taken when the Steelers drafted him in the late 3rd round at pick 93 overall, cementing his fall at 62 spots. Washington had an amazing combine and came in at almost 6'7". He's a 6th offensive lineman type of tight end who excels in run and pass blocking, but he can also be a threat in the receiving game for some yards after the catch because he's pretty athletic for his size and he's very tough to bring down. It's speculated that he fell due to medical concerns. Josh Downs was the 12th wide receiver taken when he was taken by the Colts with the 79th overall pick. Downs was seen as a late 1st, early 2nd type guy, but eventually fell to about the mid-3rd. Likely due to his concerns about his height and how well his game would translate to the NFL level. Trenton Simpson was linebacker 1 on most analyst boards for much of the pre-draft process due to his insane athleticism. He achieved a 9.83 relative athletic score, which ranks 43rd all-time for linebackers. People would eventually start to think less of Simpson in the process with the rise of other linebackers such as Drew Sanders and Deion Henley, and after Jack Campbell had a great combine, but it was still surprising to see him fall all the way to the 3rd round after finding himself in 1st round mock drafts for months. Jalen Hyatt was ranked as the number 1 wide receiver in the 2023 class by NFL.com's lead analyst Lance Zierlein, and 2nd by The Athletic's Dane Brugler. He was consistently in the top 5 for all wide receivers and was seen as a potential 1st round pick. Hyatt was eventually the 10th wide receiver taken by the Giants when he was selected in the 3rd round, likely due to concerns over how his game would translate to the NFL level due to his really odd college offense, which I have a video on if you'd like to check out. Similar to Hyatt, Drew Sanders was ranked as the 1st linebacker by Lance Zierlein and seen as a top 3 linebacker in the class. He was actually the 2nd linebacker taken, so that wasn't much of a surprise, but it was a shock to see him to fall all the way into the 3rd round of the draft due to his high upside. Sanders is still a raw prospect because he's formerly an edge player and only has a year at linebacker, but his incredible range and athleticism give him the potential to be one of the biggest steals of the draft if he can develop his instincts through more experience at the position. Brian Branch was a consistent top 20 mock draft pick in the early stages of the draft, but fell after his combine to be considered more of a late first. The most consistent spot I saw for him was the Jaguars at 24, which seemed to be the spot he'd be taken at since he was available when they were picking. However, the Jaguars passed on him, and so did other teams, leading to him falling almost 30 spots to the second round, where the Packers would eventually trade out of the pick instead of taking him, giving him to the Lions at pick 45. O'Cyrus Torrence was generally seen as the best guard in this class and as a first-round pick, but fell to the second round for unknown reasons, leading to an almost 30-pick fall from the consensus ranks. The NFL clearly didn't see him the same way, as he was the third guard taken when the Bills selected him in the late second round with the 59th overall pick. I personally think this was a steal, and this is one of the best picks in the draft. Joey Porter Jr. was consistently mocked to 4 teams in the first round. The Patriots at 14, the Commanders at 16, the Steelers at 17, and the Ravens at 22. He did wind up going to the Steelers, but not until the first pick of the second round, making him the 5th cornerback off the board. Porter was generally considered about the 3rd or 4th corner and a lock for the first round. His fall to the second round cost him 20 spots. Before the late rise of Dalton Kincaid, Michael Mayer was seen as the best tight end in this class for much of the early draft process. Even while Kincaid rose, it was still a contested debate as to who was number 1. Mayer was often mocked to the Packers, the Cowboys, or the Bengals, and it was considered unlikely that he'd fall out of the first round. However, Mayer fell to the second round and was the 3rd tight end taken behind Kincaid and Sam Laporta when the Raiders selected him with the 35th overall pick, solidifying his fall at 16 spots. The last faller we have in day 2 is Will Levis. He technically only fell 7 picks from the consensus ranking, but his fall seemed way worse on draft day. Consensus had widely different opinions on him, from being quarterback 1 to being a guy they wouldn't even take. Levis was mocked in the top 10 in my estimation in about 90% of the mock drafts I saw. And the NFL Stock Exchange podcast even coined the phrase, "Will Levis, you are an Indianapolis Colt," for how often they, and many others, would pick him for the Colts at number 4 overall. For a brief while, Levis was actually considered the favorite to be taken number 2 overall by the Texans. He was mocked so often in the first round that I made this very nice quote to remember the occasion. However, he fell out of the first round completely on draft day, leading to draft day coverage that constantly panned to him in the green room, as fans of him looked on in horror and haters of him felt validated. Titans would trade up for Levis in the second round, leading to a modest 7-pick fall from the consensus board, but one that felt so much bigger on draft day. Although not the most notable fall from a numbers standpoint, this is one I'd really like to keep track of. We're done with day 2, and now we finally get to round 1, where we have 2 big fallers. The first of which is Nolan Smith. Nolan Smith fell 12 spots when he was selected by the Philadelphia Philadelphia Eagles, with the 30th pick. Smith's insane combine performance and great performance during the interviews in the pre-draft process seemed to cement him as a top 15 pick. He was often seen mocked to Atlanta at 8, who supposedly loved him, the Eagles at 10, or the Jets at 15. The Jets actually had a chance to select him at the 15th pick, but opted for a different speed rusher in Will McDonald, leaving Nolan Smith on the board for the Eagles in the late first. Last but not least, we have Christian Gonzalez, who fell 10 spots to the 17th pick when he was selected by the Patriots. Gonzalez was a mainstay in the top 10 picks in mock drafts, and it was widely debated whether he or Devon Witherspoon was the top cornerback in the draft. There was even some hype for about a week that he'd be picked number 3 overall by the Cardinals. It was rare to see rankings where Gonzalez wasn't cornerback 1 or cornerback 2, and it was rare to see a mock draft where he fell outside the top 10, with him most often going to the Raiders, Falcons, or Eagles. On draft day, he was the 3rd cornerback taken behind Devon Witherspoon and Emmanuel Forbes. The knocks on him are that he has low ball production, but I'm surprised the team still passed up on his incredible fluidity and high-end athleticism. If there was a perfect place for him to go though, there's no doubt it would be the Patriots. Alright, so those are the biggest fallers of the 2023 NFL Draft. But just because they were picked in a certain spot doesn't mean the story is over. So much like my draft storylines video, which you guys can check out here, I'll be revisiting this video in the future to see how these players panned out, and I'll be polling for them. So if you guys want to follow the stories of this draft and see the resolutions, please subscribe. Also, if you have any suggestions on how to better organize or present this information in the future, I'd really be interested to hear. I wanted to avoid just listing off players in their relative positions and then moving on, but I also didn't want to speculate too heavily on why they fell, because I don't have access to their medical information and I don't know the players personally. So I eventually decided to just do a little blurb for each player, but I'd really be interested in the best way to present this information to make the video as interesting as possible. Anyways, I really hope you enjoyed. This video took a ton of time and I learned a whole new editing style so that I could get the pictures to move, which was a huge pain in the ass, but I really enjoyed making it, and I really enjoy talking football. So if you guys would like and subscribe to help out the channel, I'd really appreciate it. Let me know if there's any other guys that I missed, or if you just want to talk ball in the comments below. Alright, that's it. Later.